Hi everyone, my name is Jen Sookfong Lee, and I'm here doing a mini reading for the spring mini reading series hosted by Poetry London. Thank you, Poetry London, for inviting me. I'm coming to you from my home office, which is in my bedroom, obviously, and I'm here in Vancouver, which is on the unceded and traditional territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations. And I always want to start off with that acknowledgement because I write a lot about race, migration. I write a lot about racism. I write a lot about oppression and marginalization, and the events of the past year, and especially the last, couple of months, have been really, really difficult for racialized individuals, particularly Black and Indigenous communities, as well as our Muslim friends and loved ones. And I just want to say that I know I have been experiencing a lot of grief and feelings of loss, and I just see you if you're feeling those things too. There's no right way, there's no wrong way to feel this grief. You can express and center that grief and honor it in any way that you can or that is useful for you. So that is my little wish for everybody who's watching this. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to read you some poems from my debut poetry collection, The Shadow List. Here is it, my reading copy with all its little post-its. This is my very first collection of poetry. I think it's my 9th book published. I'm mostly known as a novelist. You may know me as a novelist or a children's writer. And it took me a really long time to get around to poetry. I actually started off in poetry when I was in school. I started a MFA in creative writing with a poetry thesis, and I completely lost my confidence. It was the late 90s, MFA programs not being particularly receptive back then to marginalized people. So I lost my confidence writing poetry, and I ended up on this wild, hamster cycle of writing novels. And it took me 15 years to get back to poetry. And I'm really happy that I did because I'm a writer who writes a lot of different genres, but poetry is sort of the heart, I think, and soul of everything that I do. Even if I'm writing prose, I think you can tell that I'm a poet too. So I'm going to read you some poems. These are very exciting for me. And the first poem I'm going to read for you is called Five Breakups with the Same Man. 1. You sent him a very long text, the kind you have to tap twice to read. He didn't respond. It was Christmas. 2. During sex he said he loved you. You pretended not to hear him, went home, and he didn't call for 6 months. 3. He met you at a bar. You had to call him the next day, standing in the lobby of your friend's apartment building in a coat that still carried his cologne, and say you couldn't see him again. But you did 3 weeks later. 4. He called. He said he could be a stepfather to your son, and your tears were vicious and hot, but still. You said no, and he said he would walk away. 5. In an email, he asked for a poem you had written about him. You sent it. He didn't write back. What did you expect? Moving ahead. This poem is called Yesterday You Had the Best of Intentions. I think this is one of the first poems that I wrote that would eventually form the backbone of this collection. I think I started writing this in maybe 2015 or 2014, and that was a period of my life where I was really going through some things, and I was trying to figure out who I was as a writer, who I was as a person, who I was as a mom. Here we go. Yesterday You Had the Best of Intentions. A glass of water, tepid and undrunk in the bedroom air. A body beside you whose movements are so small and so slow you cannot measure them. Muddy, thick hours spent listening to the night pass. This is the long rolling of time, that liquid dim that breaks over the neighbor's rooftops and leaks through a crack in those curtains you have never hemmed. The broken lamp beside the garage buzzing, a raccoon walking upside down, claws tapping and tapping on the gutter it clings to. You squint, the continued watch in the night. The black hurts your eyes. Do you know what you're watching for? There are secrets, indecent and jagged like a stranger's teeth biting the thin line of your clavicle. You could whisper them now and he would not hear you. But no, you should wait. Nighttime lulls, that soft, enabling dark. Outside, the first chickadee sings. You have 20 minutes, maybe 30, before the sky lifts, burning, and kills what you've been staring at all night long. I have a tendency to write really poems with really long lines, which I think is just me kind of trying to still be a novelist when I'm writing poetry. But there's a very distinct narrative sort of forward momentum in this book, which people have asked me about, and they always ask if it's because I'm a novelist, and I can only assume yes, because plot and character development and setting and stuff, all of those elements of fiction, you can Google that, elements of fiction. Sometimes there's 5, sometimes there's 6. Except I think when there's 6, when there gets to be more than 6, I don't know what those elements of fiction that the people are writing about actually are. Yeah, so I do think that those things are often really important to me, and I think they come to play in everything that I write, whether it's poetry or kids' books or a baby book or whatever. All of those things matter. So it's not something I think about a whole lot when I'm writing, but definitely as I've been sort of promoting this book, it's a question that people ask me a lot. And the short answer is yes, poems can have a forward momentum and plot and stuff and pacing, all that stuff too. I'm going to read for you a poem that I've never read out loud. This is called When You Read His Poems. And this one is quite dear to me because it's about a period of time when I was dating another poet. And I've only done that once. Well, maybe twice. But in any substantial way, I've only done it once. And dating another writer is a real humdinger. And that experience was quite sweet, but also not. So here is When You Read His Poems. It's a sliver of your body in the middle of a line, embedded, half obscured with other words, glass, the knife edges of paper, sirens. That's you, and you know it. You tell yourself you're bigger than that. It's only poetry and slight. It's not your weight on his chest, both of you damp and swollen with August heat. It's not a photograph well lit and unforgiving. Not even your voice in his head when he remembers that phone call at 3 a.m. when you were both drunk and looking for sex. Just a poem like this. You remind yourself he wasn't the first. There were the boys who wrote to compete with you, or the boys who wrote songs they sung in your mother's basement and you thought you might die because your heart ran with the chords and then stopped, abrupt. If you look now, you could find the right box. Inside, a single dog tag, letters from Israel, Taiwan, Australia, small town Ontario. You had sorted the piles, labeled them office miscellaneous, so you, huddled in a hoodie and your girlhood quilt, could read them in the night for years to come. A sleepless secret, quiet, you thought, and harmless. You have seen ghosts before, hovering transparently in front of photographs, double selves in low light. Your face in words when the words are not yours, a ghost in a funhouse mirror. You cannot stop him from writing the shake of your body when it folded and leveled. Would he, if you asked? You know the answer as well as you know the soft hair in the small of his back, or the dip in his shoulder that you thought, hysterically, briefly, had been dented just for you. You know, and so does he. You would never ask. I think I'm going to read one more poem for you in this mini reading. Another poem I've never read out loud, and this is called Kirascuro. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right. My grasp of Italian is pretty terrible. But this is a little poem about sort of motherhood and the traumas sometimes that your friends go through, and what all of that sort of tumbled together looks like. So this is Kirascuro. The circles under her eyes are purple, fading to yellow at the edges. Look what he's done to me, she whispers. In old houses, voices carry her children inside because of this December storm, their ears already attuned to sadness. Could be rooms away or just around a corner, hidden by an antique hutch, the grandfather clock that no one has remembered to wind. She shows you photos, images he saved. What is that, you ask? But when you squint, the blurred pixels clear. A drug you cannot identify, porn, bought, made, maybe sold, and then the texts. Behind the curtains you hear your son and her son pretending to be spies, whispering. How do you get through trauma like this, she says. Her voice travels flatly, and this isn't a question. She pulls at the ends of her hair, now so thin after months of skipped breakfasts, handfuls of candy at red lights. You just do. You have no choice. What a bullshit answer that is. If you asked, would she remember that time the little boys ran across her yard naked, tumbled into the trampoline, and shouted to the late summer sky in feral joy? You had both been drinking rosé since noon, and there was a smudge of orange smoke below the clouds, trails of wildfire from the interior. The boys stopped exhausted and lay on their backs, tracking the stained clouds with their eyes. Your feet were warm in the sunshine. She leaned against a pillar on her front porch, and her face was plains of light and dark. Kirascuro, you thought, but did not say. Tonight, her knees are drawn up to her chest, and she lowers her head until you can't see her face, just her hair, her body caved in on itself. Her shoulders shake, rising and falling under her pilly gray sweatshirt. You do not touch her. She isn't that kind of friend. But you say in a hush, I know, I know. Her daughter, almost 11, is upstairs, and maybe she can feel her mother's feelings through the plaster walls and hollow ceilings. Maybe the cat is with her, warm and furry, gray on her pink patchwork quilt. Outside, the winter rain rages against the single-paned windows. The boys duck behind the couch and crawl past on all fours, and you both pretend you don't see. Well, that's it. That's the end of my 10 minutes for you. Thank you, Poetry London, again for having me. And please watch all the videos from all the poets because they're going to all be great. It's quite a lineup. Thank you.